So we're moving over to the right-hand side of your attacking three. So who have we got in that space?
Oh, it's my central midfield. With a proper central kind of like player now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Graham Souness. It's the only pivot you can possibly have is Graham Souness. He was, again, so many of the boxes that I've ticked there over McDermott and Steven Gerrard. Graham Souness had all of them and more. The power that he had. His eye for goal, that kind of like strong arm headlock on opponents that he would have, both figuratively and literally sometimes. You just didn't mess with him, and he had all the talent in the world. He could pick out the pass, and he was the conductor of that Liverpool side, and he was just, again, talk about Steven Gerrard being a force of nature, but Souness was football in nature at that point in time. As just imperious. He was like having a Roman emperor on the pitch. And nothing phased him whatsoever. The European Cup semi-final, second leg in Bucharest, having broken the jaw of Mika. I think of his name now, Mika Mavia, I think it is.
Yeah, that's it, Mavia.
Yeah, incredible. He would absorb so much pressure. He would thrive and soak up and be a sponge. To all the hostility. And he would just take so much pressure off his teammates. And it's kind of like, I'll be the pantomime villain here, and I'll there's a wonderful pitch, wonderful, but where he's got kind of like John McGovern in a jaw lock, basically. And he just he was. I can understand why people disliked him, but we absolutely adored him. The less said about his managerial time, and the better. But I forgive him that.
It's weird, isn't it? How some great players don't transpose that to management, but he had
right man at the wrong time.
If
he'd have come at it as a bit more of a grown up, then then maybe it would have been different. But yeah, as a player, he was just incredible. And it's like that European Cup final in '84, going into the Olympic Stadium in Rome against Roma. And it's that kind of like, have a look at it on just Google images of the '84 European Cup final, and it's the coin toss and posing for the pictures before the kickoff with the Roma captain, and it's just like it's kind of the sleeves rolled up and he's ready for business, and it's just incredible player.
Yeah, he had what I'd call a dangerous twinkle in his eye.
He did indeed.
So moving on, we're going to go into the front three. And we'll stay on the right hand side again, Steve. So who would be your right-sided player in that three?
My right-sided player is Mohamed Salah. He's been an utter joy to watch these last 5 years or whatever it's been. He has been the best player in the world at times. At his best, I wouldn't. There's not a player in the world I would have swapped him for. Frightening. Some of the things that he can do with football. His goal scoring record for someone who's very rarely operated as the focal point of the attack is stunning. His range of goals, the skill that he has, the way he can just turn a player inside out. He is just magnetic, to the ball. He's absolutely phenomenal. Being stunningly spoiled in the past and in contemporary terms. There's been some dross at times in between, but and some good stuff in between as well. But his consistency. He scored 30 goals in a relatively poor season, collectively for Liverpool, and people will turn around and write him off and say, well, yeah, but look, he's scored 25. He's got as many assists as he's scored, and yeah, just utterly unreal. And it's there's a point that he gets to as well where he's almost zen. You can see him when he celebrates a goal, and he's just kind of it's almost like he's an out of body experience. And you just know that this is kind of he's not going to stop this for months on end now. He's off and away. So he'll have these a month or so where he'll labour and suddenly bang, he's just back in that zone. And even when he's his form's not great, which is a rarity really. He'll still contribute. He'll still do great things. You'll still see that spark of him in games, that he can still create that moment of magic. And his arrival was the we talk about the last piece of the jigsaw. We still have kind of like Virgil van Dijk to come in and Alisson and stuff like that. But as far as an attacking threat is concerned, he was the last piece in that forward, that attacking jigsaw.
I think above, there's great exponents of football, but what Salah has, in my opinion, is spontaneity. You can have all the technical ability, but to invent something in your own mind and then try and transpose it to a football pitch, he's got that, hasn't he? He's got that sense. Yeah.
He has indeed, and he's not one of these as well that if he's not playing, he doesn't care or anything. You can look at kind of like the night we came back against Barcelona and he wasn't playing. Yeah, he was there. He was on the touchline as one of kind of like the most animated of cheerleaders. He just he absolutely loves just loves the club. He loves playing. He loves the ball. He loves putting it in the back of the net. And if you can't put it in the back of the net, it's picking someone else out who can. And he has been an utter joy to watch, and he's way up there with the greatest of Liverpool players in my book. It's not long ago since he surpassed the goal number of Robbie Fowler, which takes some doing for an out and out striker, let alone someone who's effectively been, you could try and pigeonhole as a right winger or whatever you want, but I think in ye olde terms, he'd be an inside right, more than anything else, and I think the way that he hits it off with so many players as well. We talked earlier about how Alan Hansen could just effortlessly slot in with a number of different central defensive partners. You can opt players in and out. He still hits it off with them, even a dysfunctional Nunes. Darwin Nunes, he's often got the best out of Nunes, when that, because Nunes has been fits and starts all of last season, some good stuff, some not so good stuff, but, of all the players that managed to find a natural link with him, Salah was the one, others laboured a bit and struggled to try and make that connection with him. Salah was just like virtually from the start. Yeah, it's all right, I can operate with him, and again that speaks of genius. It's kind of like a very different player to what he's used to. Yet he's the one that's managed to provide to garner that kind of understanding with him the quickest.
Yeah, great players make other players better, don't they? That's the adage. So moving on to the left-hand side of your front three, Steve, who is taking that slot?
It would be easy to go Sadio Mane, who was the perfect balance to Salah down the right. I could feasibly throw, I could have thrown in Ray Kennedy there, I suppose.
Yeah.
But John Barnes, he's utterly inignorable. You cannot ignore the fella. He's just, utterly electric. As Liverpool supporters, we often cited this as that, 87 when he arrived, we won the double 12 months earlier. Won league titles and European Cups, to ad infinitum. Thought we'd seen it all. And then John Barnes came.
Yeah.
And I was utterly delighted as a kid that we signed him. there were bumps along the road. You know, there were stories that he was trying to play us off for kind of like a Serie A club or wanting kind of like a Tottenham or an Arsenal come in for them. But it was no press, you know, trying to stir things up and, you know, just making back page headlines. He himself states that, you know, Liverpool were the only club he wanted to join at that point in time. And, you know, so glad he did, because, you know, some of the stuff he was doing with football between 1987 and 1991 was unreal. You know, just an absolute electricity. Every time he'd pick up the ball, you know, there'd be an air of anticipation over what he was going to do. And just that dip of the shoulder, the laconic kind of like, he could cut inside, he could play down the right if he needed to, he could, you know, I mean, he arrived at Liverpool, you know, and he said he signed for Liverpool because he was under the impression he was going to play through the middle. And when, you know, he's turned around to Dalglish and said, well, where am I going to be playing? And Dalglish said down the left. But, you know, and he said, well, I've accepted it because it's Kenny Dalglish, like, but he said it was a very different style of playing down the left because of the freedoms that he was given. And, you know, it was a nominal position to be down the left, but he didn't. And some of the link play he'd have with his fullbacks as well. You know, Steve Nicol played quite a bit of football at left back in the first half, the 87-88 season. And the way they link down the left for the first goal against Arsenal when we beat them in January 88, the one where McMahon keeps the ball in over the opposite side of the pitch, you know, that goal is often shown, but it cuts off the part that Nicol and Barnes play in the early part of that move. The you know, link play and the telepathy with each other was just unreal. And I always remember around that time, late 80s, and you know, I remember match or shoot and these pen pictures and stuff, and the questions and all that type of stuff down the side of the page. It would be, you know, and he was asked, you know, of all the positions that you can play, which is your favourite? So he was just like straight in it, left back. You know, who can't love playing behind John Barnes? You know, and he was just magnificent. He was top scorer in 89-90. You know, outscored Ian Rush that season in the league. Anyway, I think collectively in all competitions, I think Rush just edged it, but he scored more league goals than Ian Rush in 1989-90, and that was a season where Rush didn't miss many games. You know, and part of that, particularly that Barnes Beers the Aldridge, you know, link. You know, Rush didn't quite fit so easily into that when he came back. But yeah, you know, Barnes just carried on. You know, he was, again, wouldn't have swapped him for anyone at that point in time, even to Paul Gascoigne. Again, you know, that similar to Solari now, the ball would be attached to his foot and he could make it do anything that he wanted it to. You know, and he could just leave defenders in his wake, and, you know, he'd dip one way but go the other and leave a defender sat on the floor wondering what had happened. You know, and just a beautiful player to watch.
Yeah, he was absolutely fantastic, wasn't he? And he came from like the agricultural football of Watford, didn't he? And then became this complete. He was like a racehorse, wasn't he? Such power and such ability, speed and skill, and it was all in there. It was one package.
The strength in those legs were unbelievable. I mean, what he did with Watford as well was unreal. And you know, with Watford, he did have to stick down the left. You know, Graham Taylor would allow flair, but within, you know, a strict framework. You know, whereas Liverpool, he was kind of like, yeah, you'll be down the left, but, you know, you just go where you want. You go where the ball takes you. You know, it was just proper kind of like the handbrakes off and do whatever you know, do what you see fit.
Yeah.
And again, that fluidity of midfield, because we'd had Ronnie Whelan down the left hand side of midfield prior to that, and, you know, his Barnes' arrival kind of like. There was a lot of talk that was the end of the road for Whelan, but Whelan ended up shifting to central midfield. So every time that Barnes would go on manoeuvres wherever, Whelan could just drift across and cover the space. And it was, again, subtleties, but, you know, effective subtleties that often go, I don't know, unnoticed at times. I think.
Doing the little jobs that nobody really kind of observes during a game. Yeah. So we're going into the kind of central kind of forward role. Although this guy isn't your conventional centre forward, a bit of a false nine, if anything, mate. So who have you gone for in there?
In a kind of Bobby Firmino role. He's just going to be kind of like drifting back, popping up here, there, and everywhere, and again being kind of like we talk about, kind of like Souness being the conductor. But here's the orchestra itself, and it's Kenny Dalglish, the one and only. The king. He was the man that came in and replaced the irreplaceable. Kevin Keegan went off to Hamburg, and in came Kenny Dalglish to exceed everything that Keegan had done. And Keegan was some player, who was just magnificent in a Liverpool shirt, and then Dalglish, who he had those links with David Fairclough. Fairclough actually, first season 77-78, his partner was predominantly David Fairclough, but then like David Johnson had a bit like Terry McDermott in a couple of difficult early seasons in a Liverpool shirt, and then came good. David Johnson across 78, 79, 79, 80 was highly prolific, to the point that he became a focal point in the England side as well, going into the 1980 European Championships, and then obviously came Ian Rush, and that link that was just so, we used the word already in this podcast, telepathic. Rush would make the run, Dalglish would see it, and he'd lay that in. But he would be prolific himself as well. He could score goals, plenty. Scored more pre-Rush than he did post-Rush, because Rush just absorbed so much goal scoring light. But that ability to pick out a pass, to be able to know where the player was. He'd play so often get the ball to feet with his back to goal, and he'd know exactly where everyone was around him. It was almost like he did play as if he had eyes in the back of his head, and he was the perfect player at the perfect time for Liverpool. And I grew up on the magnificence of Kenny Dalglish, and he truly was. And the fact he carried on for so long as well, and then he had that reticence once he got to be player manager, that he tried to phase himself out, but brought himself back in for the running for the double in 85, 86, and he was still dotting around and playing 86, 87, and I was there the night that he played his last game, last professional game in a Liverpool shirt against Derby, after we clinched the title on the Saturday against QPR, and then the Tuesday night, 3 days later, he climbed off the bench with a 14 on his back to play for about 20 minutes against Derby. And still look the part. Just an utter legend. It's a word that is used out of proportion at times, but not in this respect.
No, I remember that the thing I used to love about him is that the way you never really knew what was his best foot. He'd come in from the right on several occasions and whip the ball into the top corner. There's that goal against Arsenal in the early part of the 83 season.
Yeah, there's one at Portman Road as well that always springs to mind.
Yeah.
I think that was his 100th for Liverpool, that as well. I think it was.
Yeah. He receives it from a corner, doesn't he? And then kind of whips it round into the top corner. It goes in off the bar. And then there's that incredible pass against Watford, where again he kind of the skip turn off the outside of his right boot, and then he feeds Rush for an impossibly angled pass through the centre of the Watford defence, and Ian, as he always used to, just ruthlessly batters it into the net, doesn't he? Yeah,
he does. But there's no Liverpool 11 in my view that can operate without him.
No, mate, it's an absolutely fabulous 11. But and I can see that the structure of the team it's all about kind of attacking, isn't it? Although you do have that spine there as well. There's still a few players, as you say, who could mix it, but essentially it's about going forward and playing attacking football. So it's a great 11. I really enjoyed picking through it, but not actually knowing where you're going to put your component pieces. It was a bit of a jigsaw waiting to be put together, and thank you for putting it together for us. However, we are now moving into the dark lands of Liverpool's past. So I asked you to come up with the 3 worst Liverpool games of all time. What I would say is the ones you've chosen are all in advanced stages of competitions, which is the luxury, I think, of being a Liverpool fan. I mean, when you're a Birmingham City fan like me, I lament about like Division 3 away defeats at Rotherham and Preston, and they're my worst moments. But yours are actually in quite advanced stages of major competitions. So would you like to give us the first one and tell us why it was so particularly spiritually bruising for you?
Well, I mean, it's post 1990. There's so many crap games that I could have gone for, but I think by the time the Premier League era comes along, you know, I'm that little bit more grown up, and it's kind of like a bit more philosophical about it. Maybe not necessarily at the time, but you know, I think you know, kind of like time looks at it and say, yeah, that's you know, just a sign of what was coming or what was happening. And I think I've just kind of like gone back to kind of like that impressionable era again, like I said earlier on, kind of like 1980 to 1990, maybe 92 at a push, where you know any rare body blows really did hurt because you know they didn't come very often. And yeah, you know, I think football wounds you as a kid, you know, in a way that it doesn't quite when you grow. You just shrug your shoulders and move on. You know, and look, well, because you know, even stuff like, you know, I was in Kiev when we lost that Champions League final against Real Madrid, and Karius had that nightmare. But you know, I'll always look at that and say, well, yeah, but it was kind of like, you know, the kind of Apollo kind of like mission that goes around the moon to come back and do it the following year. You know, I can always look at stuff like that, you know, missing out on the league title that season that we won the Champions League against Tottenham. You know, yeah, but we came back and won it the following year. There was a, you know, there was meaning at play. You know, I can do all that, you know, now. You know, even looking back to kind of like, that last second title loss against Arsenal. You know, I'm always of the mind that we'd have never won it in 1989-90. Had we won it in 88-89, we'd have hit the wall and been. That would have been the season we'd have lost it. So you know, I can play the two off as such. But the FA Cup was where it was kind of like most painful as a kid, because you know, we won it the year I was born. So by kind of like 85, I'd never seen us win the FA Cup. We'd won, you know, league titles, European Cups, all good. League Cups are plenty, 4 of them on the spin. The FA Cup seemed to elude us. And there've been some, you know, strange defeats as well. Second division, Chelsea knocked us out. You know, we lost in successive years to Brighton. You know, we had these, you know, even Everton had knocked us out of the cup in 81. It was, so, you know, and then there'd been that, you know, quadruple of FA Cup semi-finals against Arsenal in 1980. You know, we'd lost in a replay in 79, we'd lost the final in 77. So I was aware of all this and remembered the Arsenal semi-finals. So yeah, we seemed a bit cursed in the FA Cup, but 85, we just seemed to be our year. You know, we'd gone to Barnsley, put 7 past them. I think we beat Tottenham maybe en route. And we got to the semi-final, and at Goodison it was an incredibly volatile day amongst the supporters, and the atmosphere was both electric and toxic in Goodison that day. And we came back. I think we went 1 down, but got the equaliser. Wonderful goal from Ronnie Whelan. Absolutely fantastic goal. Sammy Lee and Phil Neal play a great part in that goal as well. 4 minutes from time to force it into extra time. Then we fall behind again, and then I think we're about 30 seconds away from the final whistle when Paul Walsh bundled one over the line for a replay. So there just seemed to be something written in the stars. We'd saved ourselves not once but twice from impending doom. And the replay at Main Road, we were 1-up at half time. Paul McGrath had managed to put through his own net, and it just seemed kind of like destined that it was going to be. And then that second half, it all just fell apart. I mean, not long after McGrath loops that one in past Bailey, Steve Nicol has a golden opportunity to make it 2-0, which would have been hard for us to blow from there. Even though that was a talented Man United side, that would have been a tough ask for them to come back from. And the second half just unravelled. There was about 10, 11 minutes span where United score these 2 goals. Robson scores an absolute screamer. I think was it Stapleton or Whiteside got the winner? I can't quite remember.
Mark Hughes, I think it was.
Mark Hughes.
Yeah.
With a hint of offside. I seem to remember Joe Fagan complaining over, which was an about face, because Atkinson complained that he thought that our second equaliser at Goodison had been offside. So even then, this contentious second equaliser, or potentially contentious second equaliser at Goodison on the Saturday, had unfolded, and everything just seemed to be playing into our hands until the last 45 minutes of that second replay. It had been a pretty much a perfect FA Cup run in a season where we'd struggled greatly earlier in the season for consistency. Completely fell apart. The loss of Graham Souness to Sampdoria, that we struggled to find the right midfield mix to compete. Injuries to Ian Rush and all sorts, but Rush missed the replay through injury. I seem to remember, but Rush couldn't score against Man United. He score goals for fun against Everton, but it took him until about the early 90s, I think, Premier League era, before he actually got a goal. No, his first one was that when we killed off the title for them at Anfield in '92. That was the first time he'd ever scored against Man United.
Yeah.
Where he'd score for fun against Everton. But what he used to do, even though he wasn't scoring against Man United, the fear of him scoring amongst the Man United defence meant that chances would fall for others. So the fact that he wasn't there made it, that bit more difficult for us. But 85. That was a tough one.
Yeah, to compound the gloom as well, the boys from the other side, the City went on to win the league title that year as well, didn't they?
They did.
Although on the who in that final did you want to win, because you had Everton and Man U, didn't you? Who? Yeah. Which team would a Liverpool fan choose to win that game?
Well, exactly. I think some of us were wanting Everton to win simply because it was Man United. Others were wanting Man United to win because, well, they didn't want Everton to do the League Cup double before we'd done it. So there was a bit of a split. And I think I went into that game wanting Everton to win it, but then when Kevin Moran was sent off, I thought, no, I want the 10 men to win this now. But even then, I'd have never begrudged Everton. They won it that day, and that was an incredible winning goal from Norman Whiteside, to be fair. And to beat a goalkeeper of the talent of Neville Southall, it would take something unreal to do.
It certainly was. Finding that little gap, from out of nowhere. Right. So we're moving on to. I mean, between the kind of mid to late 80s, there was this kind of. It was like a recession in English football, wasn't it? Although there were great teams like Liverpool 1987, 88, there were teams that were adopting this kind of agrarian, backwards style of play. I mean, there was like Cambridge United lower down the leagues. I spoke about this with a guest the other week, and then there were the masters of the genre, weren't they? I think we're going to talk about them next, aren't we?
Indeed, Wimbledon and their offensive style of football. I couldn't knock them for it. They were good at what they did. Everyone used to slate Watford for it, and Watford could play a bit of football. Like say they'd have Barnes down the left, Nigel Cowan down the right. They could play a bit, but they would play the percentages as well. The old Charlie Hughes style of just get the ball in the penalty area, and there's more chance of things happening there than anywhere else on the pitch.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got it. Didn't necessarily have to like it, but effective football is effective football, and Wimbledon took it to a new extreme, which was admirable. Until you were the victim of it. They'd come to Anfield and beaten us 86-87. I think they'd been the highest placed London side in that first season they had in the first division. 86-87. I think they won at Old Trafford. Did they double over Man United possibly that season? I think they got wins against some, the biggest clubs, imaginable that season, and I can remember them reaching the quarterfinals of the FA Cup and playing Tottenham at Plough Lane, and they'd ruffled the feathers of the big clubs enough to feel that a lot of people expected Wimbledon to win that game. And because I think they'd knocked out Everton in the previous round as well.
Yeah.
So it was generally felt that they had nothing to fear. Tottenham had everything to lose, basically, and Wimbledon had nothing to lose in that. And but even then, people were kind of expecting to win, and Tottenham prevailed. Went on and lost an incredible final to Coventry City. But the dangers of Wimbledon, I knew. All too well. The two league games we played against them, 87, 88, we'd gone to Plough Lane, dominated for an hour, 1-0 up, but then they came roaring back at us last half hour and got an equaliser, and in the end, a game where we could have been 3 or 4 up at the hour, we were hanging on for the points at the end, and then at Anfield we edged a scrappy game 2-1. On a day that Dalglish put himself on the bench and was so issued over how it was going late in the game that he actually came off the bench, to try and see things over the line and influence matters on the pitch, which is a testament to just how awkward it was to play against Wimbledon. And yeah, I remember being worried about them going into the final. I remember, the fact that it was Luton, Wimbledon in the other semi-final. We got through ours. That I wanted us to play Luton in the final, because I felt that there was something quite personal about it at the point in time. Because Luton had that infamous issue when they didn't make it to Anfield for an FA Cup third round replay in '87, when the fans made it, but the team didn't. There'd been snow around the Bedford area. And they say, well, we can't make it, but all your away fans have made it, but the team hasn't. And then they ended up turning us over on the plastic, and that was the end of our defence of the FA Cup in '87. So yeah, I think we felt Luton would have been perfect because there was a score to settle, and yeah, but then Wimbledon was looming, and everyone was expecting Liverpool to win. I remember, I used to buy Match magazine. And a mate of mine called Dave, who was a Man United fan, actually, he would buy Shoot, and then we kind of read our respective magazine and then swap over. We'd swap issues, part way through the week and stuff. And you can remember kind of the previews and everyone, and they get kind of players and pundits and stuff, and to make the score prediction, and not one of them predicted a Wimbledon win. And I just had this utter sense of foreboding going towards that final, which was exacerbated by Gary Gillespie and Nigel Spatman clashing heads against Luton in a league game 5 or 6 days before the final. That drew blood. The two of them played that cup final with headbands, stitched up with headbands on, covering the wounds and stuff like that. And yeah, I just had that really uneasy feeling going into that final, as if I knew what was coming. And I think as soon as they went ahead, you just felt that in a way what we'd been magnificent, but that season, but we had reached the peak of our powers across that campaign a month earlier when we dismantled Forest at Anfield. Just after the FA Cup semi-final, and then we kind of from there, and the title had long been won by then, realistically, but it was still another week before we clinched it. But we actually clinched it mathematically 3 weeks before the FA Cup final. So we kind of sleptwalked our way to Wembley in a way, because Dalglish changed the side a few times, opted a few players in and out, and we lost that kind of momentum by the time we got to Wembley. So the team, threw his strongest team back together at that point in time, and it was just an utterly disjointed performance by Liverpool. Sat and watched it again for something I wrote one time, and take the penalty away, which was never a penalty in the first place. Peter Beardsley's disallowed goal when he's through on Dave Besant, and the ref blows to pull the game back. We didn't create enough. I think Alan Hansen has the most compellingly close chance to score in that day away from those two instances. But Wimbledon just they fought tooth and nail for it and deserved it, and that was the big thing about that. And that left made a big impact, because that was a Liverpool team that won the double in '86, but had blew a collection of potential doubles over the years. 79, FA Cup semi-final replay lost to Man United. 80, those 4 games in the semi-final against Arsenal. 88, we got to the final and won the league. 89, we won the cup and then lost the title with the last kick of the season. Even 1990, league champions and FA Cup semi-finalists, we'll come to in a minute. That was a Liverpool team that could have won half a dozen doubles over that period of time, very, very easily. The narrowest of margins, and this one against Wimbledon, certainly felt like the open goal. But that sense of foreboding was epic.
Yeah. It wasn't the David and Goliath game that everyone was kind of labelling. It was. They were a very competent, difficult team to beat. I remember watching them at St Andrews, and it seemed like they just wanted to waste time from the very first minute. Like throw-ins took longer, and free kicks took longer. It was like watching a really ugly version of Catenaccio. They were so they were brilliant at what they did in the disrupting the game and the flow of things, and just making opponents uncomfortable, and they were awful to play against, but they were massively effective in what they do. I have a huge respect for what they achieved. And how long they stayed in the top flight as well. They did 13 years, I think it was, and they had 14 years. They should have been able to live on. Needed the podcast to discuss. Get Wimbledon fans on for that one. Gary Jordan would be a good one to get on for that. But honestly, didn't feel at the time in '88, but ever since, you can't help but admire what they did. Yeah, there's an honesty and an integrity in the grit of it all, isn't there? Really,
it is. But at the time, as a 14-year-old, it stung like mad.
Yeah. It never hurts more than when you're 14, 15, does it? That's when you love your club the most intensely. I've talked about this before.
They break your heart when it goes wrong.
Yeah. So moving on to big ball specialists, we're going to go to the last of your 3 games. Yeah, you alluded to the title of '89 and '90 and the subsequent cup run. Do you want us to talk us through your final miserable moments as a performer?
It's all FA Cup, isn't it? But like I say, it just had that kind of slightly doomed effect to it. Even winning in '86, we were Everton were the better team for about 55 minutes. That was more relief than enjoyment that we came back and won that one. That kind of, and playing Everton in FA Cup finals as well. It was just that sheer, I don't know, white knuckle terror of it. Playing your local rivals in a game of such magnitude is totally frightening. That fear of being the one that loses it and hearing about it forever. It's the derby to end all derbies when it's like that. But so even winning those 2 cup finals, '86, '89, were both tinged with, they've been terror rides basically, to do it. But yeah, 1990. I think as a teenager, I'm just craving Liverpool winning an FA Cup and making it simple and enjoyable to do. No, there never seemed to be anything particularly enjoyable about the FA Cup. It felt massively uncomfortable, and we'd beaten Crystal Palace 9-0 earlier in the season, which I know, being at Anfield for that one, John Aldridge's last night as a Liverpool player, came off the bench and scored as part of that. 8 different scorers. An incredible night to be at Anfield, and then we faced them again, beating them in the league at Selhurst Park 2-0, and then going to Villa Park. Again, it was Liverpool were just expected to brush them aside, but yeah, our frailties at the back, aerial bombardment came in. And we just from there it was kind of like the semi-final that broke the Liverpool defence basically. Alan Hansen was on borrowed time. His knee injuries were just like becoming more and more. He'd missed much of 88, 89, and he'd remained fit 89, 90, but he wasn't training. He was just playing the games. And Glenn Hussein, it was just kind of like proper culture shock. He'd been part of the Gothenburg side that had won the UEFA Cup. He'd played in Serie A with Fiorentina, and he's the likes of Crystal Palace with this mad aerial bombardment.
Yeah.
And we'd led 1-0. Rush had opened the scoring, but then we'd lost Rush to injury. He was out of the game within half an hour, I think it was. And we had defenders on the bench. So, Steve Staunton came on for him, and, we just seemed to end that game with about 6 or 7 defenders on the pitch. I think it certainly felt like it anyway. But yeah, the way that game kind of like twisted and turned, it seemed quite formulaic. 1 up at half time. Yes, we'd lost Rush, but, we were just going to cruise on through to Wembley. But then, for the very first minute of the second half, Mark Bright, gets one in. And it just goes, absolute ping from there. Gary O'Reilly, 20 minutes from the end. Suddenly we were kind of like, 20 minutes from losing. I think there's only about 10 minutes left when Steve McMahon scores an absolutely, wonderful goal. And John Barnes carves one out a couple of minutes later from the penalty spot. And we've kind of rectified it. All's fine. And I think we come to within a couple of minutes of winning that one. When Andy Gray gets the equaliser to send it into extra time for Alan Pardew to make a name for himself. And it was just, there was some beautiful stuff we did in that game. But then there was just these epic periods of disarray that were just, I don't know, a big signpost of what was to come, for Liverpool over the following seasons. Suddenly this purportedly soft centre was there for all to kind of like, the being a blueprint on how to attack Liverpool, and to do it early, and all teams were doing it. And we'd lose Alan Hansen, the service of Alan Hansen that summer. And it was never quite the same after that game. We clinched the title a few games later and all of that, but we come to within 2 minutes of another pop at the double, and it would have been that Liverpool against Man United as well. The chance to bury Ferguson, perhaps. Looking back in sliding doors terms there, but yeah, again, that was a painful one for what would have been by then pushing 16 and leaving, just on the brink of leaving high school.
Oh, mate. Yeah, it was a painful loss. One of my friends said that all of the Crystal Palace goals weren't so much goals as pushover tries in that game.
We were mugged 4 times, I think.
It was an ugly way to win, but the winner doesn't care, do they?
They don't. And the thing, I think the one of the worst things about that is they didn't have the decency to go on and win the final either.
Put a sword in the perennial nemesis, and and all is forgiven. But no, they didn't do that. And it, as you say, it did burst the Liverpool bubble, really. After sort of like 15 years of dominance, he went into a very dark era afterwards. So,
But say, since then, there's a lot of ugly times since then. Even just looking at the FA Cup domestic cups, we had a spate of cup exits, the likes of Peterborough, Bolton, Bristol City, all sorts of ugliness to come. But I think as that escalated, you became kind of, I don't know, numb to it almost. And by the time I'm kind of like late teens into my 20s, it's kind of like I'm watching concerts and all sorts, and there's other parts of life that kind of I don't know, it soothes the problems of the football almost. But when you're kind of a kid, at school, and you're that kind of, I don't know, age 6 to 16, it's the be all and it's the end all, and there's
it
football
ruins your whole week, doesn't it? The result ruins your whole week.
Exactly. It's never more wounding than at that point of your life.
Yeah, we have different kinds of therapy now, Steve. Anyway, Steve, it's been an absolute joy having you on the podcast. Thanks again for agreeing to come on for us. Now, there are books out there. If for some reason on this planet you've never bumped into Steve's work before, Steve, where are they available, mate?
Available on Amazon, most bookshops as well. You might find one there. City Centre ones at the very least. Pitch Publishing online shop as well. Most book, certainly all online book retailers, and many, even some on the high street as well. But a trilogy on European club competitions, as was European Cup, UEFA Cup, or UEFA Cup, and Cup Winners' Cup, and one on the '86 World Cup as well. I'm with the surname I've got, I'm not hard to find on Twitter as well.
Yeah, and I've read them all, and I endorse them and recommend them hugely. So thanks again, Steve, and thank you all for tuning into Football Geeks this week. So we'll see you next week when we'll be talking to another superb guest. So until then, take care, everyone. Thank you.